In the days when I had a secret crush on school heartthrob Jackson, I desperately tried to lose weight during that physical education class. I almost fainted from hunger. Jackson took my hand without allowing any refusal, and took me to have a meal. He suppressed his anger and said, "Can you stop dieting? For fuck's sake? From now on, whoever makes fun of your figure, I'll kill him, okay?" But on that day, I confessed my love to Jackson. He looked me up and down with a half smile for a long time before asking, "Fatty, don't you think you're disgusting?" One after I said, "I like you." The person who reacted the most was not Jackson, it was the sports committee member standing next to his seat. "What? Mary, you said you like Brother Shiyue?" His volume magnified, my deliberately lowered volume countless times and instantly drowned out the noise of the whole class. During the break, our class was strangely quiet for a moment and there was a louder burst of laughter than before. "Damn. Brother Shiyue is really awesome. His charm is so great that even the fat girl in our class likes him." "Brother Shiyue, eh? You've rejected so many girls' confessions, turns out you like this type of fat girl? Hilarious." Jackson slowly suppressed his smile and looked at me. His tone was still relatively mild. "Are you serious?" Amid the ridicule of everyone, my face flushed red and I lowered my head and dared not speak anymore. I didn't expect that Jackson would be ridiculed because of me. I should have confessed after school. Suddenly, a huge crashing sound interrupted my scattered thoughts. It was Jackson who stood up and ticked over his desk, all the books scattered at my feet. Seeing that Jackson was really angry, the people in the class who were teasing didn't dare to speak anymore. Jackson looked down at me condescending with a half smile. "I want to know, how did you think of confessing to me? Do you think I have a deformed aesthetic?" I stiffened and didn't dare to move, but my face uncontrollably turned pale. Jackson spoke slowly and asked sincerely, "Hey, fatty, don't you think you're quite disgusting? Since I was young, because of my figure problem, I have been subtly ridiculed countless times and I have become more and more introverted until Jackson became my deskmate. The way he looked at me didn't carry any discrimination. Even when others made fun of my figure, he would coldly retort back in the one I was closed off but still longed for a sweet love. Jackson was my biggest source of dopamine, too, but today, he seemed to wake me up with a basin of cold water. It turns out that exceptions never happened to me. Before the class bell rang, Jackson rubbed his temples and left the classroom. The monitor dragged a chair over and sat next to me to comfort me. "Don't be sad, Mary. Jackson probably didn't mean those words on purpose. And you can't blame him either, right? You said you. Isn't this ingratitude on your part? He's been so good to you. Even if you like him, you can't confess. Right? You really disgusted him this time." Despairingly, I found that I actually agreed with the monitor's words. I could only nod and say softly, "I didn't have self-awareness. When Jackson comes back, I'll apologize to him." The monitor gently patted my head. "Yes, an apology and it will be over. In fact, you are also very cute, white and chubby, like a glutinous rice dumpling." I automatically ignored her last comforting words and smiled faintly. 3. Unfortunately, I didn't wait for Jackson to come back that day later. My apology was never uttered. Because during the morning self-study the next day, his friend came over to help him move his desk and change seats. The boy smiled sheepishly at me. "Well, Brother Shiyue was nauseated yesterday and asked for 3 days off to rest. Let me help him change seats." After saying that, he immediately realized something. Facing my numb gaze, he hastily changed his words. "It has nothing to do with you. Don't think too much." I blinked my sour eyes, feeling indescribably sad. Why do I just eat half a bowl more rice and an extra chicken leg than others usually do, and then I get hated? I looked down at my hands where the flesh was squeezing against the flesh and decided to never have a princess dream again. For when Jackson returned to the class 3 days later, he came back with his arm around the waist of the class beauty. The class beauty, the class beauty. Jenny is a dance student. He is 1.68 meters tall and only weighs 92 pounds. I, Mary, am 1.62 meters tall and weigh 140 pounds. The sports committee member couldn't help easing. Brother Shiyue's iron tree has finally bloomed. Is it really in a relationship or not? Jenny pouted and pretended to be angry. What do you mean? Am I the kind of person who would casually let others hold my waist? Jackson slowly raised his eyebrows and tacitly agreed with her words. Many people cheered and blessed. I lowered my head and looked at the 5-3 exercise book, the pen I was holding loose and secretly fortunately. No one cared about that episode that day, and no one had time to ridicule me anymore. This is already very good. 5 for a long time. Jackson and I had no interaction. I also gradually got used to having no desk mate and buried myself in studying alone, preparing for the college entrance examination that is less than a year away. In that mock exam, I got 149 in English for the first time. I surpassed the study committee member as soon as class was over. He directly moved his desk next to me and became my new desk mate. Facing my surprised gaze, he snorted and laughed. Sister Wang said my composition is too bad and asked me to learn from you. New desk mate, please give me more advice. It took me several seconds to react. I have a desk mate again. I was a little happy, so I couldn't wait to share my notebook recording sentence patterns and advanced words with him, and smiled slightly while pursing my lips. Here, look. I memorized this. Thank you. Inadvertently looking up, I unexpectedly met Jackson's indifferent gaze from not far away. He seemed to have been looking at this side for a long time. Jackson was the first to look away, and pulled out a ridiculous smile at the corner of his lips. I didn't know that he was so disgusted by my confession, that time so disgusted that he didn't want to see me doing well. 6. The next day, my new desk mate, the study committee member, brought me 2 buns filled with pickled mustard greens. For me? He nodded with a smile. Yes, as a thank you. I carefully took it with both hands and softly said, thank you. Every delicious food deserves pious treatment. Suddenly, there was a soft laugh of moderate volume beside me. Jackson pulled his school uniform up to his chin and put his hands on the study committee member's desk to look at him. Friend, I didn't expect your taste to be so unique. There was a blatant malicious smile in his eyes. The study committee member's eyes narrowed. Jackson, what do you mean? Jackson threw a stack of postcards on our 2 joined desks. The women printed on them were all extremely fat, and the flesh piled on them was almost overflowing the edges of the paper. For you. Jackson's eyes were casual as he looked down at him calmly. You don't like this type? How about bringing you posters tomorrow? The study committee member suddenly pushed away his chair, and stood up. His face turned purple. He roared, who the fuck likes pigs? Jackson wasn't angry, he just raised his eyebrows and slowly said, I saw you change seats. I thought you had a crush on her. Isn't it? Jackson's friend also echoed, making our side the focus again. The study committee member cursed in a low voice without saying a word. He picked up his desk and returned to his previous position. From beginning to end, neither of them looked at me, but every sentence was about me. My gaze fell on the scattered postcards. The bun in my hand was left untouched even when it cooled down before Jackson left. I moved my lips and spoke. Why do this? Jackson stopped and stood still beside me. He raised his head and his gaze fell lightly on the blackboard at the back. Instead of answering, he asked, why? Are you so lacking in love? Can you give unreservedly to every deskmate? 7. After that day, not only the study committee member, but all the boys in the class avoided me. Even more, the girls were also not very willing to talk to me. Everyone likes cheerful and warm children. And I am in personality, just like a steamed bun that is put into the steamer before it is properly risen, not good looking and not delicious, destined to be left in a corner. Even so, I didn't think about losing weight again. The only time I lost weight was because my liking for Jackson was greater than the temptation of delicious food to me. But now, I don't like him anymore. After suppressing my emotions for a whole day, I thought a KFC egg tart could heal myself, but it didn't. It turns out that things that are too embarrassing won't work either. On Friday's physical education class, the head teacher rarely let us go out for free activities to relax, but there was a sudden heavy rain halfway. The rain was fierce and intense. Everyone hurriedly ran to the entrance of the teaching building to take shelter from the rain, and I hadn't even run out of the playground when my knee suddenly dislocated and I instantly fell to the ground when the bone slipped back into place. The pain reached its peak. I lay on my side on the rubber track, too painful to sit up, until 2 pairs of legs stopped beside me. I subconsciously grabbed one of the trouser legs. When I opened my mouth to speak, the rain unavoidably poured into my mouth. I can't stand up. Can you help me? The owner of the trouser leg stopped after a few seconds. He moved his leg and pulled the corner of his trousers out of my hand. No. It was Jackson's voice. Jenny beside him chuckled. Told you not to lose weight. Now you can't even run steadily and you fell down. Jackson held an umbrella and protected Jenny in his arms. Only the uppers of their shoes were a little wet. I, who was completely soaked, looked even more embarrassed. Jackson's face was so indifferent that not a trace of emotion could be seen. He walked past me without looking sideways. His indifferent voice was soaked in the rain. I can't help you. Although the rainwater that seeped into my mouth was almost enough to drink my fill, my throat was still extremely dry. So dry that I could no longer say a word of help. I could only try hard to sit up by supporting myself on the ground. Vaguely, I could hear the discussions of everyone at the entrance of the teaching building not far away. She doesn't seem to be faking it. It seems that she really can't stand up. Should we go and help her? If you like square warriors, you go. Who the fuck said I like fat people? After about 7 or 8 minutes, I finally managed to sit up with difficulty. But I still couldn't stand up for the time being. I could only sit quietly in the rain thinking about what delicious food Grandma will make for dinner to distract myself otherwise. The pain in my knee and the embarrassing gazes behind me would drive me crazy. 9 that day. In the end, I was the one who got up slowly by propping myself up on the ground. At the entrance of the teaching building, their voices discussing me still hadn't stopped. I didn't have the courage to look back stubbornly. I walked towards the farther security room and borrowed the landline of the guard to ask for leave and go to the hospital. One bolt from the blue after another. After Grandma learned that I had patella dislocation, she concluded that it was because my upper body was too fat and my knees couldn't support it that it dislocated. She began to strictly control my diet and emphasized that she must help me lose weight successfully. After resting for 2 days, I returned to school in the morning. I only ate a whole wheat fried egg sandwich made by Grandma. I was a bit depressed, but soon, the appearance of the class teacher attracted my attention. Behind her was a very strange transfer student wearing a mask and a baseball cap. The whole face is hidden in the darkness. The class teacher's gaze patrolled around and finally fixed on me. Mike, you can sit next to Mary. After giving instructions, she hurried back to the office. The boy named Mike sat down next to me. We both had no intention of talking to each other. On the contrary, it was the sports committee member who could never hold back his voice. He turned his head and raised his chin at Jackson. Brother Shiyue, look, this guy looks like a ghost. His whole face is covered. Could it be that he is disfigured? Jenny, sitting next to Jackson, picked up the conversation. Sure, he is good looking. Why doesn't he show his face? The sports committee member shook his head and tut ghost brother and fat sister. Isn't this a new CP? Jackson didn't react at all from the beginning to the end. He just idly twirled his pen and remained silent. I maintained zero communication with Mike for nearly a month. I didn't want to talk. I was just afraid of encountering the same situation as the study committee member last time. But at noon that day after school, I noticed that he was lying on the table alone. His hand was pressing firmly on his stomach, and his shoulders were trembling slightly. After hesitating for a moment, I still walked up to him and tentatively asked, do you have a stomachache? After a long while, he just gave a muffled, The back of Mike's neck exposed in the air was already covered with fine sweat. Obviously, he was in extreme pain. Then I'll help you go to the infirmary. Fortunately, he didn't show any resistance to my physical contact. The boy is nearly 1.9 meters tall. Fortunately, I am a sturdy little fat person. Most of his weight is on me. Otherwise, I definitely couldn't carry him. The school doctor gave him medicine, and also told me to go buy a bowl of clear soup noodles. I hurriedly agreed. I trotted to the cafeteria to pack a serving of noodles and then quickly ran back. Only Mike was left in the infirmary. His eyes, which were the only part not covered, were looking at me with a half smile. You dislike me so much but still willing to save me? Very kind. Desk mate. I was confused and let out an "Ah." I don't dislike you. I thought you hated me, so I didn't talk to you. He raised an eyebrow. Why? I pursed my lips. I was already desensitized and said naturally, because I'm fat. Mike chuckled. His voice was clear and pleasant. The pair of eyes that were exposed were also extremely beautiful, clear like a slightly rippling lake. I always felt that he shouldn't be disfigured, as everyone said. After that day, The relationship between me and Mike gradually eased, but he behaved very differently. He never took off his mask and never coughed to students other than me. The same change also happened to my weight unknowingly. I had lost weight to 128 pounds. Grandma was very satisfied and said that it would be almost enough to lose weight to 115 pounds. Unexpectedly, in school, Jackson was the first one to notice that I had lost weight that noon. I was sitting in the small pavilion in the school after finishing the loaf at beef rice made by Grandma. I was listlessly carrying the bucket back to the classroom. Jackson, who was coming towards me, suddenly grabbed my wrist. He frowned and his voice was slightly low. "Did you diet again?" I struggled and said listlessly, "It has nothing to do with you, Jackson. Let me go." Instead, Jackson directly took me by the hand and walked towards the cafeteria. "You'll get hypoglycemia if you diet, don't you remember? Are you planning to faint by the roadside and wait to die at any time?" I was already annoyed because I lacked carbohydrates. So annoying. I warned him for the last time. "If you don't let me go, I'll bite you. Anyway, I haven't eaten pork for a long time." Jackson was amused by me. He let go of my hand with a snap and said with a hooked lip, "Are you so ungrateful?" I took a step back and looked at him calmly, slowly spitting out four words, "Pretentious." Then I turned around neatly and walked towards the teaching building. There were only a few people in the classroom. Mike was also there. When I saw him lying on the table again, I hurriedly asked, "Do you have a stomachache again?" The boy slowly raised his head and softly answered. He looked at me, closed his eyes slightly, and his eyelashes trembled. "I want to buy medicine, but I forgot how to get to the infirmary. I saw you downstairs just now. I originally wanted to ask you, but seeing you talking to a boy, I didn't go and disturb." There seemed to be water in Mike's eyes. He looked a bit pitiful. "Tao Tao, I'm in so much pain," instantly aroused my sympathy. "Then I'll go buy it for you now." "Wait for me." Mike pressed his stomach and barely stood up. "I'll go with you and remember the way." By the way, I supported his arm and walked towards the infirmary. When we went downstairs, we just bumped into Jackson. Mike lost his balance and fell on me. His head was buried in my shoulder socket and he murmured, "I can't walk anymore because of the pain. Let me rest for a while, okay?" I opened my mouth, but in the end, in his trembling groans of pain, I still didn't refuse. Jackson's gaze towards us instantly turned cold as soon as he took a step towards us. He was stopped by the sports committee member, and Jenny, who followed the sports committee member, saw me, and Mike exclaimed in surprise, "Wow, fat sister. Ghost brother, you two are." This is Mike, who had just been so weak that he couldn't stand steadily, suddenly straightened up looking at the sports committee member. His flat voice was filled with a hint of lifelessness. "What did you call her?" The sports committee member shrugged inferently. "Fat sister. Did I call it wrong? Am I not fat if she isn't fat?" Mike curved his lips. "Well, you're not fat, you're thin." Before the sports committee member could make a move, I quickly pulled Mike and ran away. Only when we arrived at the infirmary did I breathe a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Mike, but next time just ignore him. He won the Taekwondo championship. If you provoke him, you'll only get beaten." Mike gave an almost imperceptible smile. A hint of sarcasm flashed in his eyes, but when he looked at me again, his gaze became gentle again. "But he bullied you. Tao Tao, I can't let anyone bully you." Coincidentally, the next day, when the sports committee member came to school, he had a bruised face. It can't be done by someone inside the school except for Brother Zhuo in the school. No one can fucking beat me down. Don't let me find him, otherwise I will definitely kill him. Another boy impatiently interrupted his soliloquy. "Don't talk about you first, listen to me. I just passed by the teacher's office and heard the grade director saying inside, but the son of some group is in our senior year. He came back from abroad and can speak 3 languages. She has already been recommended." "Hey, you guys say. Who could it be?" After I heard it, I just looked up and met Mike's clean and clear eyes. He pointed to a multiple choice question on the test paper in front of him and his smile was sincere. "Tao Tao, can you explain this question to me?" Winter passed and spring came unknowingly. There was only 1 month left before the college entrance examination for the collective program of the graduation ceremony. Jenny, as the literary and art commissary, was counting the sizes of performance costumes. She stood on the podium and asked one by one. When it was my turn, she looked down at the form and directly asked, Mary, do you wear XXL or XXXL? I temporarily moved my gaze away from the wrong questions on the test paper when I spoke. There was an indescribable sense of shame and coincidence. I wear size S. Grandma suggested that I stop losing weight when I reach 115 pounds, but because of losing weight, my appetite has decreased a lot. Plus, the college entrance examination is approaching, the class schedule is tight and the pressure is high. Now, I am 1.62 meters tall and only weigh 90 pounds. As soon as I finished speaking, the whole class fell silent in unison. Then, they all turned back and looked at me. The shock in these people's eyes told me that except for Mike and Jackson, no one had noticed my change. Damn, who is this? Is this still Mary? I said it a long time ago with her face. She must be extremely beautiful after losing weight. Jenny's face suddenly became very ugly. The different expressions of everyone made me feel a bit at a loss. The study committee member who hadn't talked to me for a long time had a flash of amazement in his eyes, making me feel even more embarrassed. I had never experienced this kind of strange gaze. What I was familiar with was the kind of gaze of surprise at my appetite and figure. It was often accompanied by similar exclamations. Wow! Mary, you can actually eat a whole roast chicken. No way. Isn't a serving of fried rice enough for you? I can't even finish it. Mary, how did you manage to eat a bun in 3 bites? When the study committee member saw me looking at him blankly, his ears unconsciously turned red. He coughed lightly and turned his head. He said to Jenny, "The lead singer hasn't been decided yet. Why not choose Mary this year? In previous art festivals, the lead singer was Jenny, the class beauty." Jenny could hardly maintain her smile. "Mary seems not as tall as me. I don't know if she can hold up the lead singer's dress," the study committee member said inferently. "But she is a bit prettier than you. The dress can be bought again." On the other side, the sports committee member had always disliked me. He sneered and couldn't sit still. He suddenly stood up and questioned the study committee member. "What do you mean, standing up for fat sister like this? Now that you see she has lost some weight, you like her?" The study committee member quickly glanced at me and his muttering had a hint of self-mockery. "Can't I? Besides, now, she may not necessarily like me." I don't know which word struck Jackson. He suddenly threw the cup in his hand out. The whole class fell silent in unison. Jackson casually, IHED, and slowly uttered 2 words, "slipped." This little episode interrupted the study committee member's interest in continuing when Jackson was picking up the glass shards. His palm was cut, but he was so calm as if he had no sense of pain. When he walked in front of me, blood had already dripped onto the ground along his hanging fingertips. His gaze fell on the box of band-aids on my desk. He asked in a low voice, "Can you lend me one? The blood seems to be unstoppable." Mike on the side chuckled suddenly. He pulled the garbage bag hanging between our desks with an ambiguous meaning. He said, "Desk mate, look. This bag." He deliberately paused and then casually threw out 3 words, "really capable." I took my gaze back from Mike. I shook my head at Jackson and refused him. It had nothing to do with me, even if the blood flowed clean. I don't know why he was acting so strange and asking me to lend him one. Jackson didn't seem surprised. The blood gradually drained from his face when he spoke again. His voice was even lighter. The boy's ending sound seemed to blend into the wind, so light that it would be blown away in the next second. The lead singer for the graduation ceremony was finally decided to be me. After that day, I experienced being on the confession wall for the first time, being asked for WeChat for the first time, and receiving so many inexplicable kindness for the first time. Regardless of gender, there was even a boy from another class who directly came to our class during class break. "Mary, I bought an extra cup of milk tea. Please have it." I habitually refused, but Mike called out the dejected boy who was about to leave. He lazily propped his forehead with one hand and pulled the corner of my clothes with the other. Tao, I seem to have low blood sugar. I want to drink the milk tea in his hand, but I didn't bring any money. What should I do? In fact, his calm tone didn't sound very convincing, full of teasing. I quickly shook my head. "It doesn't matter. I have money." Then I took out my change purse and counted out 15 yuan for that boy. "Can I buy your milk tea? My desk mate wants to drink it." The boy's expression looked very complicated, angry, but unable to say anything. Getting along with Mike is very comfortable, even though more people showed kindness to me later. I still only adhered to the principle of having only Mike as a friend. This also led to rumors about me and him gradually spreading in the school. Have you heard? Mary, the newly promoted beauty in class 3, has a special hobby. She likes Ghost Brother. Damn it. I saw Ghost Brother's whole face once. He is disfigured and looks extremely disgusting. Yes. I've also seen this face is full of burn scars. Does Mary like kissing such an uneven face? Obviously. Mike has never taken off his mask and hat in front of people even when eating. He is alone. If it weren't for me, he wouldn't have suffered from these malicious rumors. I couldn't help but start to distance myself from him. Mike noticed during morning self-study one day, after being silent for a long time, he suddenly said to me in a low voice, Tao, you can change seats. I was stunned and looked at him blankly. The boy leaned casually on the chair. With his eyelids drooping, there was a hint of self-loathing in his voice that he might not even be aware of himself. I'm used to being alone. You don't have to be associated with someone like me with a not-so-good reputation. They all say that someone as ugly and disgusting as me doesn't deserve to be close to you. Tao, you should change your desk mate. I interrupted him. Who said that? It doesn't matter, he said mockingly. At first, Mike didn't want to tell me. After I asked many times, he reluctantly told me a few names. I had an impression of them. They were all boys who had shown kindness to me in the past. Mike would help me fight back when others said I was fat. Now I also want to do something for him. I found those boys and firmly refused them again and warned them that if they spread rumors again, I would directly call the police. After Mike knew about it, he covered his eyes with his hand propped on his forehead, and his shoulders trembled silently for a long time. I guessed that he should have cried from grievance. I comfortingly patted his shoulder. No one will speak ill of you again in the future. Don't be afraid. His shoulders trembled even more violently. I reasonably deduced Mike was moved. Until the end of the college entrance examination, nothing unpleasant happened again. The only thing worthy of everyone's discussion in the days before the college entrance examination was that Jackson and Jenny broke up after school at noon. Mike and I were walking in front. Behind us came the sports committee member's cautious, comforting voice. Brother Shiyue, don't be sad, the next one will be better. Jackson slowly overtook me. When passing by, his gaze fell on somewhere ahead and he said casually, What am I sad about? I never liked her in the first place. Mike suddenly raised his hand and motioned for me to look at the playground ahead. He curved his lips. Meaningless lie. Desk mate. There seems to be a dog barking. After the college entrance examination, I checked the answers and it could be considered an extraordinary performance. The monitor organized the last gathering and meal on the day after the results came out. When I arrived, I met Jackson at the entrance of the restaurant. He was leaning against a tree, with a glimmering red between his fingers. His deep gaze was fixed on me, making me feel a bit uncomfortable. I nonchalantly shifted my gaze and wanted to walk around him and leave Jax, and directly grabbed my wrist, pulled me in front of him, and my back hit his chest. Are you sick? I raised my hand to hit him, but he controlled my other hand without even looking. Jackson looked down at me with a half smile. No matter what, I beg you now, you won't give me a chance anymore, right? I avoided his gaze. I don't understand what you're talking about. Don't pretend. Jackson hooked his lips. You understand. He pinched my chin and turned me to face him. You know that when I said I didn't like Jenny, I said it on purpose for you to hear. I fell silent and stopped struggling after a long time. I calmly looked back at him. Yes, I know. Not only do I know these things, but I also know that you had a good impression of me a long time ago. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to confess to you. The first time I lost weight, I did it secretly without telling anyone. I dieted unhealthily and gave up taking the bus and walked to and from school on foot, hoping to lose weight as quickly as possible, and confessed to Jackson while wearing a long desired skirt, but he noticed my unnaturally pale face and the hand covering my stomach. He, who was about to go play basketball with the sports committee members, stopped frowning. He asked me in a deep voice, Menstrual period. I shook my head and perfunctorily said, It's nothing, it will be fine in a while. But Jackson was unmoved and insisted on taking me to the hospital. I had to tell him that it might be caused by dieting. His frown deepened even more. Jackson took me out to eat under the pretext of accompanying me to see a doctor. The boy held my hand and walked in front with a sneer. He said, Do you care so much about other people's eyes? It doesn't matter even if you starve to death, right? I was so hungry that my head was dizzy and I could hardly hear what he was saying. I just nodded subconsciously. Yes. Jackson was extremely angry by me. The strength of holding my hand was extremely strong, but after a while, he still chose to compromise and said with suppressed anger, "Can you stop dieting? In the future, whoever dares to joke about your figure, I'll kill him, okay?" I curved my lips and said in a low voice, "Don't you think I'm very fat? Like this it's ugly." Jackson stopped when he heard this. He didn't let go of my hand and just turned around like this, leaning down and approaching my face. His gaze looking at me was so focused as if he were doing the last physics problem. "I've seen it." His tone was serious without a hint of a smile. "Very cute. Everywhere is very cute. It's not because being fat that makes you look round and cute. It's the facial features," Jackson said. "The facial features are very beautiful." The boy was so serious as if he were answering a question. At that moment, I realized that my liking for Jackson was being infinitely magnified. I held his hand back and tried to step out of the muddy swamp of inferiority for the first time then. But in the next second, I was pushed back by him. For a long time after that, I couldn't stand up again. Jackson's eyelashes trembled suddenly. The hand that was restraining me loosened. "Yes." He lowered his eyes and pulled out a sad smile. "I liked you a long time ago, but being with you means carrying too much. Strange gazes. Endless ridicule. So now you don't have the right to ask me for a chance." I couldn't listen to his belated confession and interrupted him directly, turning around and leaving several meters away. I vaguely heard Jackson's voice again. He probably knew that his words didn't have any persuasiveness. His voice was so low that it seemed to be talking to himself. "But I like you more than all of them." After adjusting my mood, I pushed open the door of the private room and walked in. I glanced around. Mike hadn't come yet. The class teacher smiled and beckoned to me. "You did well in the exam, come and sit." After I came in, Jenny's face had been very gloomy. Suddenly, not knowing what she thought of, a smile hung on the corner of her mouth again and she sighed. "Don't think that Mary is a good girl just because she has good grades. In fact, she also had puppy love." "What are you talking about?" I looked at her inexplicably. Jenny's eyes were innocent. "Anyway, we've graduated. It doesn't matter if you say it now." "Mary don't be so fussy." I was so angry that I laughed just as I was about to clarify. The class teacher interrupted me. Who did Mary have puppy love with?" "It's her desk mate Mike." After Jenny finished speaking, a class teacher's eyes wide and so much that they almost protruded and hit the lens. Jenny was even more satisfied. "You said, how could such a good student as Mary find a student with poor grades and bad conduct?" The class teacher frowned deeply, and her gaze at Jenny was a bit strange, looking at me. Jenny didn't notice she was looking at me provocatively. "Hey, Mary. You can't deny it just because your boyfriend is ugly. Later, ask him to take off his mask and show everyone the burn scars on his face, compared to spreading rumors about my relationship with Mike." I couldn't tolerate slandering Mike even more. "Jenny, have you seen scars on Mike's face?" She choked for a moment. "No, you just blurted it out without seeing it. Everyone says so." I nodded and learned and applied the formula on the spot. "Everyone also says that you got the third place in the art exam by bribing and getting it through connections. According to your logic, this is also a fact, right?" Jenny instantly panicked. "Who is talking nonsense?" She started to turn around like a headless fly, trying to see a guilty expression on someone's face. The private room was noisy. Another group of people who had been discussing intensely also came and pulled the class teacher to ask, "I overheard the grade director and you talking about the son of some group not long ago. Which class is he in? What's his name? Is he handsome? He must be handsome, right? He's the son." The class teacher was so busy on both sides that she didn't have time to speak. The noisy atmosphere in the private room reached its peak, and no one could hear anyone's clear voice. Until the door of the private room was pushed open again. Suddenly, it became quiet. Everyone's gazes were focused on the extremely handsome boy with a tall and straight figure at the door, comparable to a star. The girl sitting closest to him was the first to blush and speak. "Who are you looking for?" The class teacher came to her senses and let out a sigh of relief. She smiled and said, "Don't you recognize him? The protagonist of all your discussions just now is right in front of you." Jenny exclaimed in disbelief. "Mike? On the other side, the son of the prince?" "No. What's the situation? Is this peerless handsome guy in front of us Mike? Or the son of the group, who can speak 3 languages and has been recommended. The class teacher pushed me, who was still in shock and hadn't recovered, in front of Mike. Look. He's also Mary's boyfriend. My astonishment was no less than being struck by 5 thunderbolts. The somewhat unfamiliar Mike in front of me raised his eyebrows lazily and looked at me with a nasal sound. He gave an I agreed. Agreed to what? The private room was like an explosion. No wonder once when I was handing out test papers, I saw that he got almost all the multiple choice questions right. He didn't write much on the big questions and just threw the final answers on it. I thought he copied it. I used to think Mike's eyes were very beautiful, so I thought he must not be ugly. There was once when he wore those shoes that were the same as those worn by a basketball superstar I like. I still firmly believe they were fakes. The meal ended hastily amid the exclamations one after another on the way Mike sent me home. He patiently answered all my questions. At first, when he transferred to another school and wore a mask and a hat, it was because he had just had a fight not long ago and the injuries on his face hadn't healed later. He just got used to wearing them. As for why, he still took the college entrance examination, even though he had been recommended. Mike looked at me calmly. To go to the same university as you. Girlfriend. Reminded by him. I remembered this. You misunderstood. It was Jenny who. This is my first time in a relationship. There was a shallow light in Mike's gentle eyes looking like this. He seemed a bit obedient. There are not many people in my family who like me since I was a child. I have been forced to compare with others and live under high pressure. I am also always abandoned. When I was abandoned by my relatives for the first time when I was a child, I committed suicide once, but later I got used to it. Although Mike was trying his best to sound casual, I still noticed the gloom in his eyes that he didn't hide. While my nose felt sour when I heard it, it turns out that life in a wealthy family can be so difficult. He saw my slightly red eyes and raised his hand to gently rub the corner of my eye, chuckling lightly. Don't feel sorry for me. This is the first time I have been firmly chosen instead of being abandoned. I am already very satisfied. Mike seems to have gotten used to this humble situation. This is the most heartbreaking thing. I pursed my lips slightly but still couldn't hold back my tears. Mike pulled me into his arms and gently stroked the back of my head. Don't cry, Tao Dao. He suddenly brought up the previous topic and asked slowly. By the way, what did you say? I misunderstood just now. I paused for a moment. Tears were gathering in my eyes. About to fall. I blinked quickly after choking several times. I finally opened my mouth stiffly and said, nothing, boyfriend. If I deny it now, Mike will probably jump into the river on the SBO. He is really lacking in love. I can sense that my feelings for Mike are also somewhat special. It doesn't matter to try first. This city has the most 985 universities. The school where Mike was recommended and the school I am applying for are very close in ranking, so when he gave up the recommendation and chose to apply to the same university as me, his cold and heartless family didn't hold him accountable too much. Over the summer vacation, I have completely accepted Mike's identity as my boyfriend. He is very good at progressing step by step up to now. The most intimate act is just to kiss on my forehead when he sends me home at night, except for being a bit clingy. He has almost no shortcomings on the first day of school. I completed my disillusionment with college among the 3 roommates. 2 chose to ignore me when I greeted them, and the other one is Jenny. Her dancing talent has given her a great advantage. It's not surprising that she can get into the school compared to my negative attitude with dark clouds piling up on top of my head. When she saw me, she curved her lips meaningfully and smiled. What a coincidence. So not coincidental. 80 of the students in our school stay in local universities, so it's not unusual to meet former classmates on campus, but some overly coincidental things can also be a headache. For example, in the evening when Mike and I were having a meal, he told me that Jackson was in the same major as him. After I was depressed, I remembered that Jackson could even beat the sports committee member. I quickly reminded Mike, don't have a conflict with Jackson. When you are alone you can't beat him. If he bullies you, tell the counselor. If it's too excessive, we will call the police. Mike was picking out the carrots in my dish without looking up. He slowly asked in response, how do you know I can't beat him? Mike had no idea how powerful Jackson was. This was related to his personal safety. I put down my chopsticks and put on a serious face and said word by word, don't be brave. He is very good at fighting. Don't you remember that you were beaten with bruises all over your face because of fighting before? I have seen Jackson fight several times and he was hardly injured. It's over. I forgot that Mike was relatively fragile in his mindset. My words hurt him for the latter part of the meal. He didn't say much. Although he was unhappy, he still quietly peeled shrimps for me. I bit my chopsticks and timidly looked at him, feeling even more guilty. After dinner, we started the daily routine of college couples as usual, taking a walk from the playground to the deserted artificial lake. I apologized and comforted Prince Song all the way. He finally loosened up. Mike pulled me into his arms and buried his head in the crook of my neck and rubbed it like an abandoned docile puppy. Tao, coax me. I hugged him back. I am coaxing you. Not enough. The breath around my ears gradually became hotter. Kiss me, okay? This sentence was almost said right next to my earlobe. I trembled unbearably. My breathing couldn't help but quicken a lot. Kiss where? The voices of each other became smaller and smaller. As if tacitly not wanting to disturb the intimacy in this small space, Mike pulled down the collar of his hoodie and exposed his pale neck with faint blue veins. Kiss here. When I stood on tiptoe and kissed him, Mike clasped the back of my head. His Adam's apple rolled, and his voice was hoarse. Tao. Leave a mark. Tell everyone that I am yours. According to the steps he taught me, from holding that piece of skin to gently biting it. After repeating several times, I successfully planted the first strawberry in my life with a face as red as a red pomelo. I pushed him away. I lowered my head and didn't dare to look at him. It's already kissed. Mike bent down to look at me at eye level. The boy's smile was affectionate, and his fingertips rubbed my lips, tapping intermittently. You are so good at kissing. There seemed to be a charm that could captivate people's hearts in his throat. Tao, you kissed very comfortably. Plant a few more next time. Okay. Isn't being in a relationship a give and take? Why doesn't he kiss me? I couldn't ask. So I could only stare at him silently for a few seconds before shaking my head. No. I hope he can reflect on his own problems these 2 days. Take the initiative to propose kissing me too. Military training is not difficult for someone like me who also lost weight during my senior year of high school. The instructor responsible for our military training in our school is a junior who has just returned to school after being discharged from the military. By the end of the first week of military training, there have already been rumors of several pairs of freshmen and junior instructors falling in love. The instructor leading our company doesn't have one yet, but I don't know if it's an illusion. Sometimes when he corrects my movements, he gets very close to me. Mary, raise your arm higher. The instructor surrounded me from behind and pressed my arm with both hands to adjust my movement. I even felt his breath right behind my neck. I quietly pulled away and said euphemistically, just tell me what to do. The instructor didn't take my words to hear. The smiled. Junior, are you so stupid? I still don't like to personally correct movements for others. As he said that, he unexpectedly raised his hand and flicked my forehead. If others asked me to personally correct their movements, I wouldn't be happy to do it. This is clearly his job. During the break, Jenny sat next to the instructor, drinking water and making a moderate commotion. Wow. Mary, the instructor is so good to you. If you didn't have a boyfriend, you could really consider the instructor. Boyfriend? The instructor's face changed slightly and he questioned me. You have a boyfriend? I temporarily took my gaze away from Jenny and nodded. The instructor stared at me expressionlessly for several seconds. You have a boyfriend and you didn't say it? Are you deliberately leading me on? So bitchy? I was angered by his absurd conclusion. Did you ask me? Besides, you don't seem worthy of me leading you on. Before he could speak, Jenny threw the bottles. He stood up and pointed at me and shouted, how can you talk to the instructor like that? Is your boyfriend worthy to be compared with the instructor? Cowardly and perverted. Anger instantly surged to the top of my head without thinking. I walked up to Jenny. I spared no effort and slapped her. I warned you not to slander Mike again, right? Jenny touched her face in a daze. You dared to hit me? In the next second, she rushed towards me. We started fighting. I unleashed the power that I had when I was 140 pounds. I pressed Jenny to the ground and beat her in the end. It took 3 girls to completely pull me away. The instructor sneered at me and directly announced, you are at fault. You are not allowed to eat at noon today. March in place on the playground. Jenny got up from the ground, patted the dust off her body, and gave me a triumphant smile. Under the high temperature of 38 degrees, I stood alone on the playground and marched in place under the scorching sun. It wasn't until everyone started taking a lunch break that I was allowed to go eat, but there wasn't much left in the cafeteria at this time. I ate a little casually, and then started the afternoon military training again in the evening, after the dismissal, when I returned to the dormitory and took a shower. I was exhausted. I was so hungry but didn't have the energy to go to the cafeteria finally. I had to be called downstairs by Mike's phone call. I listlessly threw myself into his arms and started complaining as I talked. I felt wronged and cried, "Mike, I'm so hungry. I only ate a few mouthfuls of very unpalatable rice noodles at noon. I really want to eat steamed buns filled with preserved vegetable." Mike was extremely quiet. After helping me sit down on the bench next to me, he immediately ran to the cafeteria to buy buns for me. After I finished eating, he took out his phone and looked at it. He said to me without much emotion, "Go back to the dormitory and rest after you're full. I have something to do now. I'll come to you later." I stared at him for 2 seconds, then lowered my eyes. "Okay, go and be busy. I'll go back too." He didn't think much and turned around and left. I recalled the message I accidentally saw on his phone just now. "Brother Shiyue. That stupid junior is in the KEV at the school gate now, come here." I quietly followed behind Mike for some reason. At this moment, I inexplicably remembered the time when the sports committee member was beaten in senior year. Fragmented memory fragments flashed through my mind eventually. They all pointed to one fact. Mike has been pretending to be weak and actually strong. This premonition was confirmed after looking through the glass of the KEV box and seeing Mike's single and action knockdown for people including the instructor without any injuries. He held half a broken wine bottle in his hand, and the pointed glass was under the instructor's eyelid. Less than 3 centimeters away from the eyeball, there was an unruly look in his eyebrows that I had never seen before. He even smiled casually. "Senior, are you thinking about my girlfriend?" The instructor kept shaking his head. No, really not, classmate." Mike skillfully twirled the wine bottle. The pointed end of the glass was hovering just a few centimeters from the instructor's eyes. "My girlfriend has suffered a great injustice today. How does senior plan to compensate?" The instructor trembled and said, "What do you say, classmate?" Mike was too lazy to waste words with him. The sharp end of the glass in his hand was about to pierce his palm. I stopped him in time. "Mike." A very calm tone, but his figure still suddenly stopped until the instructor and the others fled in a panic. He didn't turn around. I walked up to him and squatted down, taking the bottle from his hand. Mike lowered his hand. After his Adam's apple rolled several times, he opened his hoarse voice. "I'm sorry." I was silent and didn't respond. After a long time, Mike spoke again. "Are you going to break up with me?" I immediately looked up. Facing the boy's red eyes, emotions were surging inside. There was a sense of impending danger completely different from his harmless appearance usually. I sighed, curled up my fingers and slipped them into his palm, making him feel a little relieved. "Of course I won't break up with you because of such a small matter. I just can't figure out why you lied to me." Mike tightly wrapped my hand with his hand and pulled his lips bitterly mockingly said, "Because I know you don't like me. You agreed to be with me out of pity. If I don't act pitiful, you will leave me." I half knelt in front of him and cupped his face with both hands. "Mike, look into my eyes. Inside are the purest likes for you. I sympathize with many people, but I won't be with them just because they are pitiful. Liking is not a cheap thing that can be given by anyone." He held my hand tightly, and there was an unwavering paranoia in his eyes. "You can't lie to me." Mike was extremely nervous. I leaned over and gently touched his lips. "Forget it. If he doesn't take the initiative to kiss, then it doesn't matter if I take the initiative. If I lie to you, I will never eat steamed buns filled with preserved vegetable in my life." Mike's expression finally gradually softened. In the alley at night, I swayed Mike's hand and hopped around. Let me tell you, we are really a perfect match. You are very good at fighting, and I am also super capable of fighting. Today I almost beat Jenny to the ground. She didn't even hit me at all and her face will be swollen for at least a week." Mike kneaded my hand and said in a low voice, "You don't need to do it yourself in the future. I'll deal with them." "But Jenny is a girl," Mike replied. "I will pay attention to changing to a pink stick." I laughed out loud and stood on tiptoe to give him a lob kiss on the side of his face. "I like you so much, Mike." A sudden light laugh not far away suddenly cooled the atmosphere. Jackson looked at me with deep eyes. So, are you going to start advocating violence too? Just because he helped you fight a few times without thinking, and you were irresistibly attracted? Mike was still brooding over what I said not long ago that he couldn't beat Jax and seeing him pick a fight. Mike walked towards him expressionlessly. I hugged his arm in time. Is he worthy of fighting with you? I coaxed and persuaded him. Transforming into an expert in child psychology. Jackson is obviously weaker than you. Isn't he at bullying a child? If you fight with him, you can beat him and make him cry easily. It won't be good if he breaks down and calls the police then. Mike finally stopped. He sneered and evaluated him condescending. Coward. You can't even like a person openly. What right do you have to compete with me? Jackson was stabbed in his sore SBO. The sneered and took the initiative to come forward. I was running out of patience. I took out pepper spray from my bag and sprayed it vigorously on his face. Jackson's eyes were injured by the spray and he couldn't see the way when he staggered. His back hit a tree. No one helped him. It would definitely take him a long time to open his eyes and return to school, but even so, his eyes probably suffered permanent damage now. His embarrassed appearance is somewhat similar to mine when I was sitting alone in the rain in senior year. Jackson, seeing your end today. I finally feel that I have walked out of that rain. I will never think of that day when I was so embarrassed that I was suffocating. I never expected Jackson to be in the same situation as me that day. This is good enough. At least it proves that there really is karma in the world. Mike is not as Jackson said, only using violence to solve problems. He had already collected evidence of the instructor's sexual harassment of girls, and Jenny's cheating in the art exam and bribing the invigilator. He submitted them all to the school the next day. The school expelled Jenny and gave the instructor a demerit and ordered him to suspend school. The speed was astonishingly fast. Facing my questioning gaze, Mike flicked my eyelashes with his fingers and said lazily, my mother also graduated from this school 3 years ago. She donated a library here. Currently, she is discussing the specific matters of donating to dormitory buildings with the campus. Sure enough. Later, I met Mike's mother once at school. Remembering Mike's pitiful childhood, I euphemistically advised Mike's mother to be better to Mike. She looked at me with a fake smile and said, that little brat told you that we abandoned him and made him commit suicide. I nodded sadly. Mike's mother rolled up her sleeves and explained to me through gritted teeth. When he was in the first year of junior high school, he didn't want to spend the new year with us in China. He secretly took his father's mobile phone and sent a message to his assistant asking him to prepare the plane. He wanted to fly to Melbourne alone. After we found out, afraid that his father would beat him, he drank laundry detergent first in an attempt to commit suicide. After washing his stomach all night, it was finally cleaned. Mike's mother curled her lips coldly. Otherwise, if your boyfriend talks to you now, he can still spit out bubbles. Me. Mike and I got engaged before the start of our senior year. After the engagement ceremony, he was drunk and remembered the scene when he first saw me in high school. He held me in his arms and sat in the hanging chair. He curved his lips casually and his eyes were blurred. When I saw you at first glance, I thought you were like a walking glutinous rice dumpling. At that time, I thought you might not be suitable for losing weight. If you lost weight, you wouldn't be so cute. He chuckled as he spoke. But I don't see any difference between other girls. Tall, short, fat, and thin are all the same to me. I corrected him. It's because you are face blind. He rubbed my ear. Maybe at that time, I thought I might like girls who are a little fatter. It wasn't until you lost weight that I realized. Suddenly, he pinched my waist and turned around while holding me. It became a position where I straddled him. I kissed the tip of my nose and said gently, you are my only criterion for choosing a partner. As long as it's you, no matter what you become, I will fall headlong without hesitation. I put my arms around his neck and curved my lips. Me too. What a coincidence. When rumors spread all over the school that your face was covered with burn scars, what I thought was that if no one was willing to accept you, I could happily pick you up and take you home.